Joins us now, Jonathan Freedland, Guardian columnist, amongst other things. Jonathan, there is the intrinsic question about, is it likely that there's a new regime in there, or ready to go in there and take over? But there's also the sort of parallel war, in a way, isn't there, that Israel has with Iran at the moment, and the long-standing enmity between the two, and the commitment to kill Israelis that the Iranian regime clearly has. Even if the American war ends, the Israeli one may continue.
That's exactly right. There is daylight, and there actually always has been, between the US goals, which are shifting and often confusingly articulated, and the Israeli goals, which are in a way much more tangible and practical. You know, Israel, ideal world, from its point of view, Netanyahu would love to see the toppling of the Iranian regime, but failing that, the weakening of them, the degrading of their military capability, every day they lose kit and hardware is a win as far as he's concerned, because it reduces their ability to make good on what they've always explicitly said, which is they want to see the elimination of Israel. Remember, it's not just this or, you know, the ending the occupation of the West Bank. They want to see Israel wiped off the map. So he has been saying for 4 decades, it's been the touchstone, cornerstone of his whole career, that he just wants to see Iran's ability to remove Israel, or to inflict existential damage on Israel, hobbled and gone. Yeah, and so ideally he would love to see the regime gone, but failing that, he'll continue just to degrade their ability to inflict harm, either by their own forces or by their proxy forces that surround Israel in a ring of fire, so-called the 3 H's: Hezbollah in the north, to the north in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen. That's his goal, but you can see how that is different, and particularly different from where Donald Trump now seems to be, which is looking for a way out of this. They are in different places.
It's different. It has clearly already massive implications for the population of Israel, who are spending half their lives in shelters at the moment because of the scale of the missile attacks on Israel. But it also, I mean, again, I'm no expert, but it makes me think that if that were the case, that he just went for it, Benjamin Netanyahu, that it's, and continues to go for it, there's something of a war of attrition about that, isn't there? And that has implications for everybody.
Yeah, because he has, for years, been suggesting and selling to the Israeli people this idea that force alone will solve this problem. If we hit them before and it didn't work, it's because we didn't hit them hard enough. That's what he's been saying. I've been writing that Netanyahu has become the man with a hammer to whom every problem looks like a nail. He just only has one trick up his sleeve, one solution to everything, which is always force, always hit them harder. And opposition leaders in Israel are now reminding the public there that the country's strategy philosophy used to be, yes, you'd win a very quick, short, decisive war, and then you would come in with political answers, a political horizon, diplomacy, negotiations. He's not interested in that. He just keeps hitting and hitting and hitting, and he's seeing, I think, the limits of that strategy.
Well, it's interesting, but he may be seeing the limits of that strategy in terms of outcome, but also perhaps the limits within Israel as well, within the Israeli public, because I noted in a couple of podcasts ago, Yonit, your co-host, saying, well, she lives there, she's the one going down to the shelters, saying a couple of weeks ago, you know, he's not very visible here. He isn't coming out and giving statements, and we're in shelters night after night after night. The kids aren't in school. We're all trying to keep things as normal as possible. You know, the Israeli public has a very high pain threshold for the kinds of things it will endure for the nation's safety, but even that could run out.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth just imagining ourselves into that situation. It's very hard to do. But imagine during that COVID period, so kids at home, they're not at school, etc. You're confined to the house for large periods of the day because of the fear that the siren is going to go off. But you couple that with an existential fear, not of a virus, but that 7-8 times a night, you're waking up the children, kids in pajamas, you're going either into a room or downstairs into an underground shelter. You're sleep deprived. And you're fearing that this could be the one that hits you. In that context, to have a prime minister who, as she did point out, is really speaking to foreign media. He does interviews in English. He's done vanishingly few press conferences in Hebrew, in the language of his own citizens, and yet asked them to sit there for 4 weeks, week after week. It's a war of choice. And public opinion is still basically supportive of it, in big contrast to the United States, where the public think, why are we doing this? In Israel, they know why they're doing it, because they know Iran has had weapons pointed at them for years, and the idea of once and for all, let's finish the job, is appealing. But you're right, he's not there, it's taking a toll, it's not been quick, and they're not really seeing the results, because Netanyahu told them at the beginning, day one, we've destroyed 90% of their arsenal. Well, this 10% is going a very long way. It's still coming every single day. So patience is just beginning to wear thin.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Jonathan Freedland, Guardian columnist, co-host of that podcast, if you haven't heard it, called Unholy Two Jews on the News, marking its 5th year. I'm joined by Emily Maitlis, co-host of Global's podcast and Newsagents, to talk about these comments that Tony Blaire has made today. You'll find more detail about them on the LBC app as well. Addressing what he says is an unholy alliance between the left, or parts of the left, in British politics and Islamists and Islamism. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, he's writing after the attack on 4 ambulances that were run by the Jewish charity. We talked about this last week, Sheila, and he says it isn't isolated. It'd be bad if it was an isolated incident. It isn't. It's part of a pattern in Britain and elsewhere in Europe. And he quotes the 3,700 incidents of anti-Semitism sharply increase in attacks on visibly Jewish people. I'm not surprised that he's come out on this. I have to say, I've occasionally been sort of called in by Blaire because he's wanted to make remarks about this in the past. So I think this is very much on his radar and has been very much part of what he's talked about in the past. And he has talked about Islamism. I also think that in the last week, we have seen more people, actually non-Jewish people, prepared to talk about what they have witnessed with Jewish friends or colleagues. You know, Alice Thompson wrote a column in the Times last Tuesday.
She said it's time for non-Jews to stand up.
Exactly. And I think she felt very strongly that it can't be something that you can only talk about if you're Jewish, because a lot of her Jewish friends are saying, I think it's time to go, or I think I might have to go. You know, I'm reading those messages from a lot of people saying, I don't get it anymore, I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And she writes in this article that if, you know, that it's not about, you know, sort of trying to help your friends. It's about saying, is this the kind of Britain that we want to live in, right? We wouldn't tolerate it with any group. If it was a clear and obvious target with any group, you wouldn't tolerate it. So I think I feel like she kicked this off last week. Camilla Long also writing at the weekend about this very odd sort of line between, you know, political art. Where does political art start becoming sort of anti-Semitic montage, right? You know. Well,
it's interesting because when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, and there was, of course, all the big issues and discussion and debate and ultimate kind of quasi sorting out of the issue of anti-Semitism in the party, I used the moment to invite each day, 1 week, 5 interesting or prominent Jewish people in the UK. Started with Howard Jacobson.
Of course.
And so we're going back way before October the 7th, way before what we now see so routinely on the streets of Britain. And he said, he said as a young boy, as a young teenager, he and his friends would poke fun at their parents and grandparents when they said to them,
100%,
always have the suitcase ready, ready. And he said, I'm starting to eye up my suitcase. And that was over a decade ago.
It's so interesting because I totally understand. We grew up with people telling us to learn the lessons of the past. You know, I have this gold bracelet that belonged to it was part of a band that my grandmother had, and she fled Nazi Germany, right?
Is that what you're wearing?
So, yes,
Very
I mean, this was made from her band, but, you know, in other words, when she had to flee, you know, with sort of days to go, that was what she had on. That was her way of being able to leave the country. That was what sort of, you know, paid for the rent or whatever. It was the escape plan, you know. And so I think Howard's right. I think we did all grow up thinking, oh, the older generation are terrified of everything. You know, my grandmother wouldn't let me go on roller skates because it was sort of terrifying. But now it's sort of coming back to roost. And I'm not particularly hyperbolic about this, and I am a strong critic, you know, and I have been pretty consistently a strong critic of everything that went on in Gaza and everything that we see the Netanyahu government trying to do. It's horrifying for us to see that, as it would be for a foreign government.
Yes.
Watch from afar. But it's the idea that suddenly this is all your fault, you know, this is all on your shoulders. This is all, it sort of elides into something which is about your faith or your race, not about your politics.
I felt even since that first conversation I had with Howard, but certainly since October the 7th and everything we've seen since, I have felt that there's been, and I'm glad that more people are sort of breaking that silence in how they write. I mean, there have been plenty of people who have said absolutely unacceptable, but it's the pulling it all together and realising this isn't just about Jewish people. This is about Britain. This is about, you know, if you live in a country where routinely you can just
say that's okay,
savage Jews because they're Jews, you are heading to nowhere as a country, and that's why non-Jews have to stand up to it, I think. And I mean, even last week I mentioned it to John Soper, conversation with him, heading to a cafe in Richmond where I live, just before work, walk past the road that the synagogue is on. Van of police officers comes out, all leaning against the window, looking a bit knackered, and they'd obviously just done a night shift outside a synagogue.
It's very curious. I mean, I am always grateful when there are security officers, you know, outside of our place of worship. And
wouldn't it be nice if they weren't necessary?
Well, I've been to other countries. Actually, I was in Argentina at Christmas, and I tried to go to a synagogue, and I wasn't allowed in because I didn't have a letter saying. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing. I did not have a letter saying that I was, you know, of the congregation. I come, and so we've got to this weird place where even sort of Jews are being turned away from their own places of worship
because we're not quite sure.
Because nobody trusts anyone, you know, even within the community. And you want to be really sympathetic, but you know, I was with my son and we had a 25-minute chat. I mean, we missed half the service. Had a 25-minute chat on the doorstep with the guy who was trying to ask me questions to prove that I wasn't about to blow the whole place up. Now, I mean, we are in a straight. Of course, it has, and that's why you can't get angry, you can't get frustrated, you can't even be hurt by that because it's obviously protective measures that they put in place because they feel they need to. But it is a strange place to be where there's so little sort of trust and no one. You know, you want to be welcoming. Of course, you do. Everyone wants to be welcoming, and you can't even do what you can't even go to a place to pray.
And I think the important thing with Tony Blair's comments is that if he just starts all of us, whoever we are, wherever we are, just having conversations about it and understanding that whatever's happening elsewhere in the world, you cannot point to your Jewish neighbour or indeed your Muslim neighbour for different reasons and say,
you're
this,
their
you're
politics.
That. Yeah, you're
right.
This, you're that, therefore I'm going to hate you. We've got to get better than that with this. Thank you, Emily. Great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Anyway, on the question of a new regime in Iran, a more reasonable, quotes, regime in Iran, Amex has called from Edmonton. Hello.
Hello, Sheila.
Oh, you wanted to talk about Tony Blair. My apologies.
Yes.
Fire away.
Yes. Blair is playing hypocrite. He's being like hypocrite. I'm sorry to say this.
That's all right. Go on. Tell me why.
Yeah, Blair made a mistake. He forget Britain into Iraq war, and he knew that. Yeah, after that, the people of Britain took him out of leadership. What he's doing now, try to wash himself from the evil that he did. Yeah, if Blair is right, he should condemn any evil done by Netanyahu, and then come up and talk about something else. You don't just talk about one thing. Whenever that Jewish society is being attacked, it's going to come up quickly and talk about it.
But Amex, he hasn't only talked about one thing. He has been talking about this war in Iran. He has spoken about wider global issues in the Middle East. He's talked about it almost non-stop since he left office.
Yeah, but he don't seem to be condemning. You know the languages. He's quick to condemn if something happened to the Jewish community. I had any Muslim there to go and attack the Jewish community. I've got nothing to do with what's going on in Iran or all over the place. They should be left alone, live their life. Yeah, but the problem is what is happening there by Netanyahu and his friends. And I'm saying even the people of Israel, not all of them support him. He has to come out and say clearly to Netanyahu.
Amex, by your logic, the reason Jews on the streets of the UK are being at best criticised, at worst murdered, and in between every other kind of horror, the reason that's happening is because of what the West has done in the Middle East, because of what Netanyahu has done since October the 7th. By that, I don't agree with you, by the way, but by that argument, I and you should be causing trouble for every Iranian living in Britain because of what the Ayatollah's regime has been doing. We should be, but we don't, because it would be insane. And anti-Semitism is insane and cruel and criminal.
And so Islamophobia.
I know,
so,
but can we? I'm aware.
Yeah, give me a chance. What we've seen from our leaders being hypocrites, they don't come out and condemn what is going on. Yeah, the killing of school children. Yeah, that's terrible. No society in the world will accept that. If any brother from my family, my society, going to attack a Jewish family, I would say to them, you're not Muslim.
Well, it has been spoken about in Parliament, and it has Amex. I mean, I know you're looking for condemnation here, condemnation there, condemnation everywhere. You're not always going to get that in politics when you want to hear it yourself for all kinds of understandable reasons. But the Prime Minister himself described that incident as unacceptable in the House of Commons. And short of standing there and just berating the Israeli leadership, which you may want him to do, but short of that, he has done what you say is missing from our politics. It has happened in the House of Commons, out of the mouth of the Prime Minister. But I do think we can talk about anti-Semitism without automatically saying, but I need to talk about Islamophobia as well. We must talk about Islamophobia. We must talk about the abuse of Muslims for simply being Muslims. That isn't right either. It's no more right than anti-Semitism is. But they come from different histories, and in this country at the moment, they are of a very different, I would argue, order of magnitude. You might disagree with me. Amex, thank you. Amex in Edmonton. It's 2:30. We'll get your call.